Hello, my wonderful DHCs. I'm sorry that I couldn't quite make it to the call today, but I really wanted to make sure that you had some time to hear from me because I wanted to talk about map testing with enrolling kids coming this year. And if you're really on top of your emails, you might have already seen in the Fast Five, and you may have already read the information that I dropped this week or last week, actually, by the time of watching this, um, around the enrollment testing for MAP. A lot of the stuff shouldn't be surprising to you, but I really want to make sure that it's super clear and laid out. There was a lot of positivity around the way that things were kind of structured and laid out just in terms of expectations in the spring. And I just want to make sure that we're keeping that going forward. Before you're like seeing this and like panicking, like, oh my God, I have to do so many kids testing in the fall. I just want to remind you that actually most of you have already done so much of this work already. Any students that you tested in the spring do not need to test in the fall. We are not doing twice a year testing. We're doing once a year testing in the spring, but we do need to make sure that we're testing all students that are new at our schools. And if you miss kids in the spring, you should also be testing them in this upcoming fall here. The reason we're having this conversation now is to make sure that you're prepped for August. That's probably when you have the most new enrollments in the school year and thinking about those kinds of things. But also, I just want you to have plans going forward as you're going throughout the year for how are we going to be doing enrollment and assessments throughout the year, because that's one of the things that could be trickiest, right? As we get a new kid in, we want to get them started in classes, but of course, we also want to make sure that we're getting this assessment information in. So I just want to start off again with our why, what we're doing here, right? We're not the point of, but one of the points of Fusion is that we have this brand promise of working and teaching every kid individualized education for every student. And really, ideally, we'd like to do this from the very first day of class, which is impossible if we don't have any relationships with those kids. And so therefore, this kind of assessment testing is going to give our teachers and our ADs and yourselves information about these kids that we wouldn't otherwise have, that just from their previous schools or from their parental experience is not going to be represented essentially like in the data. The other thing is we want to make sure that the DSDs on schools are making correct course level placements. I mean, a lot of times it's going to be based off the student's history, but there are times where, the school that they went to before maybe wasn't so good, or it wasn't so good for them. And, we might see something like a kid that scored really well in the test, but, was getting Fs in school because the reason they were getting Fs had nothing to do with their academic skills. And we don't want to be putting those kids in courses that are below their level because of that history there. And then the last piece here, which I kind of already touched on, is we want to make sure that our teachers are customizing and individualizing their instruction based on their academic information from MAP and their cognitive skills from Mindprint. This is really the way that we're going to make sure that we are customizing, that we're making this one-on-one class for kids from day one, first couple of weeks of our kids' sessions, so we can really change their experience with academics and education entirely. So the expectation that we're laying forth is that all newly enrolling students need to be tested in math and reading, and Mindprint. That really hasn't changed from the past. That was always the expectation, but we're just going to be super crystal clear. That is the expectation. And this is maybe a little bit newer, want to really push that students should be getting this done before their first classes, because we want to make sure that we're making the correct enrollment decisions. Ideally, we should have this MAP and Mindprint information done before they start sessions, whenever possible. This isn't on you to just solve as the DHCs. This is something as an entire administration team that I think you all need to get together and talk about your loop. If you read that Fast Five email where I dropped this information, I do say in it explicitly, take some time in your administration meetings with your team. Every person on the team has a role when it comes to MAP testing. Talk through it, make a plan, and as a team, come up with how you're going to be doing this testing. Now, of course, there's some families that come in, they need to get started right away, right? Or if your school's in a situation where you're desperate for hours, you really can't make sure that you have that runway there. I understand it. We understand that. So in instances where it's not an option to get students tested before their first classes, they need to be finished by the 5th session, because that's kind of when we're comfortable making course changes by that 5th session, which, for most kids is about 2.5 weeks after they start. So that's a time frame you're looking at there. Kids in our cohort here, we're just saying that it's excellent. You're being very proactive if you're making sure that you're getting that information, that testing done, maybe even before we have enrollment going. You're doing a great job if it's before their first classes. And then, of course, it is okay if you're doing it by the time they get to that fifth session there. That is sort of our like structure for like what it looks like, what's good. If you're not hitting that fifth class session, that's a conversation that we're going to need to be having in the future. That's really the mark that we want to make sure that we're getting there. Of course, some of you are looking at me probably crazy right now and saying like, well, certainly can't be every kid. No, not every kid, right? We of course have exemptions. Those of you who've used the exemption waiver before, it stayed the same. You want to make sure that you're getting those exemption waivers signed. They're geared towards the parents, and it comes with an acknowledgement on the parent side that, yeah, it's going to take us more time if we are going to be going through and not taking these assessments because our teachers aren't going to be ready on day one. And so we might end up needing mastery sessions or something along those lines to support your kids. And they're acknowledging that when they sign the waiver. We also say that this is an exemption is definitely a recommended conversation for any family that has issues with school refusal or extreme test anxiety. That is of course something that makes a lot of sense, but at the end of the day, it is a parent's choice about whether they're going to sign or not, or whether they're going to have their student test or not. It is up to them. In terms of accountability, like I said, everybody on the team has an important role there. I'm going to be sending monthly updates until we basically get a system in the background that does this automatically for you and for me that says, hey, are we getting our kids tested? And I'm really looking, ideally 100% of your kids are tested, but I'm really looking at this 80% completion target. This is the point where I'm asking questions about like, what is our loop? What is our pattern? Where are we struggling? Where are our gaps? Or not is the case, right? Like ideally, I don't have this conversation with anybody. That's not what we're looking for. And like I said, everyone on the team here has a role. The head of school needs to be making sure that they're talking to parents about this in the intake process. This is not something where you as DHCs should be the first people broaching the concept of MAP and MIPRE with families. DSDs, I think actually that there's a really good opportunity for them in their meetings with families to register them for tests, particularly for families that are like, we need to get started right away. And then the DSD says, okay, well, let's register some stuff. So we don't come across that issue that we had sometimes in the spring, right? Where families come and they'll try to register their kids for days when they have classes. If the DSD owns that, you can't have that overlap issue there. You as the DHCs, of course, you are primarily in charge of administration. You are still my front line. You're still the people that we're relying on to get that data there organized, making sure that you're following up with the families. That follow-up component is the hardest part of your job. I have absolutely no doubts about it. Didn't in the past. It's affirmed again by our experience in the spring of this year. Following up with families, following up with families, following up with families. It is so important. It's absolutely crucial to what it is that we're doing. And then really the ADs, they're in charge at the end, right? When you have the information, the using and sharing of that information. But in a lot of campuses, we have the ADs working with the DHCs in the administration process. And if you're someone who is struggling on your campus, I really recommend talking to your AD about it, or maybe even talking to DHCs who have their ADs providing support for them. I think that's really crucial for the process that you're going through there. And providing online testing support. The entire idea of this is just to take some labor off your plate in terms of when kids need to be testing, the advantages that they can test from school or from home. And it's going to be every single week starting in August, Tuesdays and Fridays at 12 Eastern or 9 Pacific or whatever hours you have in between there for your CST and MT folks. There is online registration. You or the DSD can do it. There's a form that you basically go in. You like put the student's name, you put the email of the person who needs to be informed. And then what happens is on the day of the test, I will email those people that are in that form there and say, hey, Bobby Fisher or whoever did test today or didn't test today. Just like in the spring, I can't actually follow up with them if they're not there on the day of. I won't be pinging you, hey, they're not here for testing today. It will be an after the fact thing. That's just because I'm one person trying to test all the students that we have that are being registered here, and it is not practical for me to be able to on the moment solve those problems for you. But the issues that we were having in the spring of when are my kids signed up for, you're signing them up now. You have that time, you have that control. So there's no scheduling that they're doing on our side. You're doing the scheduling with the parents, or you're saying, hey, I need your kid to come in Tuesday this time, Friday this time. And of course, if you don't want to do online testing, schedule it yourself. You can do it on campus. At the end of the day, you actually are still going to have to do mind print testing on campus. That is not something I can support you with remotely, but map testing I will be doing every Tuesday and Friday going forward, starting in August. I do recommend that you go with your whole team, read through this document. There's a lot of other things in there, registration and administration details, suggested comms loop, both within your administration teams and with parents, as well as a couple sample letters that you can send to parents, some more details about that virtual testing, best practices. A couple of things that are worth mentioning here. I highly, highly, highly recommend that you use things like Friday School, and we actually have the sign off from operations that if the student has hit session 5 in their classes or is about to hit session 5 in their classes, we can tell parents, hey, you must make sure that you're attending one of these sessions that we've signed you up for, or coordinate a time with me, or we will be using class time to do map testing. That's something that we've gotten a sign off on, because we've had such difficulty in the past with not all parents, but a couple of parents who just like constantly are dropping the balls on us. So do read about that. Make sure that you're familiar with how long these exams take. A lot of people make the mistake of underplaying it, and then kids or families are frustrated. So just having a sense of that, knowing what accommodations can be provided for. I can provide accommodations remotely, but if a kid really needs accommodations, I highly recommend that you test them on campus. It's just going to give them a better experience anyway. And then ownership breakdown, right? We've talked about this before. This is not just your job, my friends. This is the job of the entire administration team. And I really want to make sure that you're getting the support that you need to get this finished. And that starts with you advocating, but it is officially in the document there. So you can point and say, hey, Nick said that you're supposed to be helping me. Let's get this done, my friends. Last but not least, I do want to make sure that we're working on the messaging. I'm actually not worried about y'all, but you can maybe check some of your other administrators in this. A couple things that we want to do is make sure that we're celebrating kids for getting this test completed. You can decide how you do that on your campus, whether it's candy as a reward or just, they get their enrollment package stuff when they finished all their testing, whatever it is, making it so that getting to the end of this is some like really celebratory moment. The other thing is making sure that you're communicating to kids and to parents that this information is informative, not performative, right? This is not a grade. This isn't going on their transcript. This is something that is for you and your teachers to have the information so that you can best provide that personalized education to kids. So that's the basic idea there. If you have any questions, I'm always available on Teams. Please hit me up. And yeah, otherwise, thanks so much for your time. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye.